Good morning, Patriots. It's been a while since we finished Indian in the Cupboard. I thought today we would read Miss Daisy is Crazy by Dan Goodman. The weather's turned off much colder, so I can't go outside for a little bit, but I think we will enjoy this story anyway. My Weird School Number 1, Miss Daisy is Crazy, and this is dedicated to Emma. The chapter 1 is I Hate School. My name is AJ. I like football and video games, and I hate school. Our teacher, Miss Daisy, was taking attendance. It was the first day of second grade. Miss Daisy told everyone in the class to stand up and say our name and something about ourselves. All the kids laughed when I said I hate school, but there was nothing funny about it. I've learned a lot in my 8 years. One thing I learned is that there is no reason why kids should have to go to school. If you ask me, kids can learn all we need to learn by watching TV. You can learn important information like what breakfast cereal tastes best and what toys you should buy and which shampoo leaves your hair the shiniest. This is stuff that you'll need to know when you grow up. School is just the dumb things that grown-ups thought up so they wouldn't have to pay for babysitters. When I grow up and have children of my own, I won't make them go to school. They can just ride their bikes, play football, and watch video games all day. They'll be happy, and they'll think I'm the greatest father in the world. But for now, I wanted to let my new teacher, Miss Daisy, know from the very start how I felt about school. You know what, AJ, Miss Daisy said? I hate school too. You do? Well, we all stared at Miss Daisy. I thought teachers loved school, but if they didn't love school, why did they become teachers? Why would they ever want to go to school as a grown-up? I know that when I'm a grown-up, I'm not going to go anywhere near a school. Sure, I hate school, Miss Daisy continued. If I didn't have to be here teaching you, I could be home sitting on my comfortable couch watching TV and eating bonbons. Wow, we all said. What's a bonbon? Asked Ryan, a kid with black sneakers who was sitting next to me. Bonbons are these wonderful chocolate treats, Miss Daisy told us. They're about the size of a large acorn, and when you can pop the whole thing right in your mouth, you don't even need a napkin. I could eat a whole box of bonbons in one sitting. They sound delicious, said Andrea Young, a young girl with curly brown hair. She was sitting up real straight in the front of the class with her hands folded like they were attached to each other. Miss Daisy seemed like a pretty cool lady for a teacher. Anybody who hated school and liked to sit around watching TV eating chocolate treats was okay with me. Me and Miss Daisy had a lot in common. Maybe going to school wouldn't be so terrible after all. Chapter 2, Dumb Miss Daisy and Principal Klutz. Miss Daisy said it was time for us to clear off our desk and see how much we knew about arithmetic. Ugh! If I gave you 58 apples and Principal Klutz took 28 of them away, Miss Daisy asked, how many apples would you have left, AJ? Who cares how many apples you would have left, I said. I hate apples. If you ask me, you and Principal Klutz can take all the apples away, and it wouldn't bother me one bit. You would have 38 apples, said a girl. Andrea Young, in front of the class, had a big smile on her face like she'd just opened all her birthday presents. Andrea Young thinks she's so smart. I hate arithmetic, I announced. You know what, Miss Daisy said? I hate arithmetic, too. You do, we all said. Sure. I don't even know what you would do if you multiply 4 times 4. You don't? I have no idea, Miss Daisy said, scratching her head and wrinkling up her forehead like she was trying to figure it out. Maybe one of you kids could explain it to me. Boy, Miss Daisy was really dumb. Even I know what you get when you multiply 4 times 4, but that smarty pants I know everything girl Andrea Young beat me to it and got called on first. If you put 4 crayons in a row, she told Miss Daisy, as she put a bunch of crayons on top of her desk, and you make 4 rows of 4 crayons, you'll have 16 crayons, see? Then she counted the crayons from 1 to 16. Miss Daisy looked at the crayons on Andrea's desk. She had a puzzled look on her face. I'm not sure I understand, she said. Can someone else explain this to me? Michael Robinson, this kid wearing a red shirt with a dirt bike on it, explained 4 times 4 again using his pencils. He had 16 pencils on his desk, in 4 rows of 4 pencils. Miss Daisy still had a look on her face like she didn't understand. What would happen if you subtract half of the pencils, she said. Michael took away 2 rows of the pencils and put them back in the pencil box. Then you would have 8 pencils, we all said. Andrea Young added, half of 16 is 8. Miss Daisy wrinkled up her forehead until it was almost like an accordion. She still didn't get it. She started counting the pencil on Michael's desk out loud using her fingers. She got it all wrong. We gathered around Michael's desk and tried to explain to Miss Daisy how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide numbers using the pencils. Nothing worked. Miss Daisy had to be the dumbest teacher in the history of the world. No matter how many times we tried to explain to her, she kept shaking her head. "I'm sorry," she said. "It will take me a while to understand arithmetic. Maybe you can explain it to me more tomorrow. For now we have to clean off our desks because Principal Klutz is going to come in and talk to us." I know all about principals. My friend Billy from around the corner, who was in second grade last year, told me that the principal is like the king of the school. He runs everything. Billy says that if you break the rules, you have to go to the principal's office, which is like a dungeon down in the basement. Kids in the dungeon get locked up and are forced to listen to their parents' old CDs for hours. It must be horrible. Miss Daisy told us to be on our best behavior so Principal Klutz would see how mature we were. Finally, he walked into our room. "Welcome to the second grade," he said cheerfully. "I'm sure we're all going to have a wonderful year together." Principal Klutz said a lot of stuff about the rules of the school. We're not allowed to run in the halls, we're not allowed to chew gum and stuff like that. But I wasn't listening very closely because I kept staring at his head. He had no hair at all. I mean, none. His head looked like a giant egg. When Principal Klutz was all done telling us the rules of the school, he asked if anybody had any questions about what all he had just said. "Did all your hair fall out of your head," I asked, "or did you cut it off?" Everybody laughed. Even though I didn't say anything funny, Miss Daisy looked at me with a mean face. "Actually, it was both," Principal Klutz replied with a chuckle. "Almost all of my hair fell out all on its own, so I decided to shave the rest." "That's the saddest story I ever heard," said this girl named Emily, and she burst into tears. "Don't feel bad," Principal Klutz said. "It could have been a lot worse." "How?" sniffled Emily. "Well, at least my brain didn't fall out of my head." We all laughed, even Emily. Principal Klutz was a pretty funny guy for a principal. Any other questions? "Do you have a dungeon down in your basement where you put the bad kids?" I asked. "Actually, the dungeon is on the third floor," Principal Klutz replied. Nobody laughed this time. He quickly told us that he was just making a joke and that he didn't even have a dungeon. Principal Klutz must have felt bad that we didn't think his joke was funny because he invited us all up to the front of the room to touch his bald head. We did that and it made everyone feel better. Principal Klutz seemed nice, but a lot of people seem nice when you first meet them. Then later you find out that they are evil villains who plan to take over the whole world. I bet he was lying about the dungeon. Chapter 3. How to Spell Read. Before school started, my mother told me that second grade was the most interesting grade because this was the year that I would be able to read chapter books all by myself. I already know how to read, even though I had tried very hard not to learn. You see, my friend Billy told me that you really don't have to know how to read. Billy says that when you grow up and make lots of money, you can pay people to read for you. That sounded pretty good to me. "I hate reading," I announced when Miss Daisy passed out the spelling worksheets. "Me too," agreed Miss Daisy. "You do?" we all asked. "Yep," she said. "I can't read a word." "You can't?" "Nope." "You can't even spell the word read?" Michael Robinson asked. "I don't have a clue," she said, scratching her head the same way she did when she told us she didn't know how to multiply 4 times 4. "Just sound it out, Miss Daisy," Andrea suggested. "Read," Miss Daisy said. "No," we shouted. "I give up," she said. "Do any of you know how to spell the word read?" "R-E-A-D," we all chanted. "Wow, I didn't know that," marveled Miss Daisy. "You've taught me a lot today." "How did you get to teach second grade if you don't even know how to spell read?" asked Ryan. "Well, I figured that second graders didn't know how to spell very well, so it wouldn't matter if I could spell." "I know how to spell lots of hard words," Andrea Young announced. "Me too," everyone said. "Really?" Miss Daisy said. "Like what?" Everyone started shouting out words and how to spell them, but Miss Daisy stopped us and made us take turns. She had each of us go up to the chalkboard and write 3 words we knew. I wrote tonight, writing, and McDonald's. By the time we were done, the whole chalkboard was filled with words. There wasn't even any room left for more. "Wow," Miss Daisy said. "You kids have taught me so much this morning. I'm really glad I decided to become a teacher." Chapter 4. Miss Daisy is Crazy. In the lunchroom, I opened my lunchbox and saw that my mom had packed me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I traded it with Michael Robinson for his potato chips. Everybody was talking about Miss Daisy. Miss Daisy is crazy, Ryan said. She's the weirdest teacher I ever had, said Emily. She can't read, she can't write, she can't even do arithmetic. What kind of teacher is that? A bad one, I said. Hey, I just thought of something, Michael Robinson was able to say, even though his mouth was full of peanut butter. Do you think maybe Miss Daisy isn't really a teacher at all? What do you mean? Ryan asked. Maybe she's an imposter, said Andrea. An imposter? What's that? I asked. Somebody who imposts. No, silly. An imposter is somebody who pretends to be somebody, Andrea explained. She might be a fake teacher. Maybe Miss Daisy is really a jewel thief or a bank robber, I guessed. Maybe she snuck into the school and is hiding so the police won't catch her. I think you're the crazy one, said Andrea, giggling and almost choking on her milk. But what if Miss Daisy was a bank robber? Or she could be a horse thief or a cattle rustler or somebody who parks there on the yellow line of the curb. Maybe my head was starting to fill with all these awful things about Miss Daisy and what she could be. Maybe Miss Daisy kidnapped our real teacher and is holding her for ransom, I suggested. Wow, you think so? Emily asked, starting to look scared. What's ransom? Asked Ryan. My mom tells me I'm handsome, Michael Robinson claimed. Not handsome, ransom, said Andrea. I don't know what it is, but whenever somebody's kidnapped, they get held for it. In cartoons, people who get kidnapped are always tied up to railroad tracks, I reminded everybody. Maybe our real teacher is tied up to a railroad track somewhere. We've got to save her, said Emily, and she went running out of the lunchroom. Wait a minute, said Michael Robinson. That doesn't make sense. If Miss Daisy can't even read or do arithmetic, how's she going to be able to kidnap a teacher and tie her to a railroad track? She doesn't look like a kidnapper to me, Ryan said. We should tell Principal Klutz, said Andrea. He'll know what to do. No, I shouted. We don't know if he's in on it. What if we tell Principal Klutz how dumb Miss Daisy is? He'll fire her, replace her with a real teacher who knows reading, writing, and arithmetic. We'll have to learn all that stuff. You don't want to do that, do you? No way, said Michael Robinson. I don't care if she is an imposter, a bank robber, or a kidnapper, I said. I like her. I say we keep her. Me too, Michael Robinson agreed. I think she's cool. Okay, let's not tell anybody. It will be our little secret. We all agreed. Our lips would be sealed, but not sealed with glue or anything. That would be gross. Chapter 5, The Most Genius Idea. After lunch, we had agreed, which means we get to go out to the playground and run around. Miss Daisy said we needed to burn off some energy. Now this is more my style, I announced when we got outside. I made a beeline for the monkey bars, then me and some other kids hit the swings. After that, all the boys had a contest to see who could spin around in circles the longest without throwing up. Michael Robinson won. Then we all sat down on the grass. Even though Miss Daisy was pretty cool, we all agreed that we hated school. We had a promise to one another that we would hate school forever, even if we changed our minds and decided that we liked school. That's when Ryan came up with the most ingenious idea in the history of the world. This was his idea. We should buy the school. Ryan told us that his father worked for this big company, and that once his father's company bought some other company, just like you would go into the store and buy a candy bar. Ryan said it happens all the time. He said he didn't see any reason why we couldn't buy the school just like that. If we bought the school, what would we do with it? Michael Robinson asked. We could do anything we want with it. We'd own it. Could we turn it into a video game arcade? I asked. Sure, why not? Instead of teaching, reading, writing, and arithmetic, we could teach the kids how to play video games. And we could ride skateboards in the hallways, asked Michael Robinson. Sure we could, Ryan said, if we owned it. I got all excited because if there's one thing I like to do most as much as playing football, it's playing video games. Oh, and riding skateboards? I started emptying out my pockets. I had a nickel, 3 pennies, and a lifesaver. The other boys emptied their pockets too. We separated all the pennies, nickels, dimes into little piles. Then we added up the money. We had $1.32. Wow, Michael Robinson said, that's a lot of money. I don't think it's enough to buy a school, though, said Ryan, who knew a thing or two about financial matters because his father worked for the big company. Well, how much do you think we need to buy a school? Beats me, said Ryan. We'd better ask Miss Daisy. We all rushed inside after recess and asked Miss Daisy how much it would cost to buy a school. Gee, I don't know, said Miss Daisy, who didn't seem to know much of anything anyway. Why do you want to buy the school? We want to turn it into a video game arcade, I told her. What a great idea, she beamed. I love video games. There are so many schools and so few video game arcades. It makes perfect sense to turn some of those schools into video game arcades. I'll arrange a meeting with Mr. Klutz tomorrow so we can ask him if we can buy the school. But right now we have to go to Mr. Cooney's office. Mr. Cooney's office is down the hall from our class. He says he's the school nurse, but personally I think he's a spy. I'll tell you why. There's this big poster on his wall that says this: EYWXLO, and a bunch of other little letters. I tried to read it, and it didn't make any sense. Even Andrea Young didn't know how to read the poster, and she knows everything. I think Mr. Cooney has created a secret code, and he's using the poster to send the mystery spy messages. I will have to keep an eye on him. When we walked into Mr. Cooney's office, he had us sit all lined up in the size order. I was one of the shortest kids, so I had to stand in the front of the line. Then Mr. Cooney told us to take off our shoes. At first I thought he didn't want us to track mud all over the office, but then he told us that he was going to weigh and measure us. Obviously, he was trying to gather information about us because he was a spy. My friend Billy says that the heavier you are, the smarter you are, because heavy people have bigger brains. But I think Billy just says that because he's overweight. I weighed 52 pounds. Mr. Cooney showed us the awesome ruler that he has. It is made of metal and stretches out 6 feet long. When he presses the button, the whole thing shoots out of the hand and disappears like magic. That's pretty cool. I'll bet he has a lot of other spy tools too. He wouldn't let us play with the magic ruler, but Mr. Cooney ran around measuring everything. He showed us the bench where we were sitting was 17 inches high, the door to the office was 30 inches across, and his foot was 12 inches long. Hey, my foot is a foot, Mr. Cooney explained. Aren't all feet feet, I asked. Some feet are less than a foot, and some feet are more than a foot, but my foot is exactly a foot. I had no idea what he was talking about. Mr. Cooney wrapped the measuring tape around his forehead and announced, "Look, my head is almost 2 feet in circumference." I knew that circumference was the distance all the way around a circle, and diameter was the distance through the middle of a circle. "What's the diameter of your head, Mr. Cooney?" I asked. Everyone laughed, even though I didn't say anything funny. "That would be hard to measure, but isn't measuring things fun?" Mr. Cooney asked. "I wonder how much the scale weighs." Mr. Cooney started to measure and weigh more things, but Miss Daisy said we had to go back to class. Chapter 6. What do you want to be? At the end of the day, Miss Daisy sat on the floor and we all sat around her. She told us to talk about what we wanted to be when we grow up. "I want to be a veterinarian," said Andrea. "Does anyone know what the word veterinarian means?" asked Miss Daisy. "That's somebody who doesn't eat meat," said Michael Robinson. "It is not," I said. "That's a vegetarian. A veterinarian is someone who fought in a war." "That's a veteran," Miss Daisy said. "Andrea, would you like to tell the class what a veterinarian does?" "A veterinarian is an animal doctor." That Andrea Young thinks she knows everything, but for once I knew she was wrong. "Animals can't be doctors," I said. Everyone laughed, even though I didn't say anything funny. Miss Daisy said a veterinarian is a doctor who takes care of animals. That made a lot more sense than that dumb thing Andrea said. Emily was next, and she said she wanted to grow up and become a nurse in a hospital. "Why do you want to do that?" I asked. "People come into hospitals all sick and injured, their arms falling off and their guts hanging out." "AJ," Mrs. Daisy said in her serious voice. Emily got all upset and ran out of the room crying. "What did I say?" I asked. "What do you want to be when you grow up, AJ?" Miss Daisy asked. "I'm going to be famous. A famous football player," I said. "Really? And why do you choose that field?" "Because I love football," I said, "and if I was a football player, I wouldn't have to read or write or do any arithmetic or go to school." My friend Billy told me that football players are really dumb. "Your friend told you that?" said Miss Daisy. "Yep, Billy's really smart. He also said to me that if you dig a deep hole and it's deep enough, you can dig all the way to China. And if you fall into that hole, you'd fall all the way through the earth and pop your head right out the other side. And you'd be moving so fast that you'd shoot all the way into outer space." Michael Robinson said that sounded cool. He decided that instead of becoming a firefighter, he wanted to become one of those that hole-digging astronauts. Emily came back into the room with a tissue. Everybody else went around in a circle saying what they wanted to be. This girl named Lindsay said she wanted to be a singer. Ryan wanted to be a businessman like his dad. Andrea said that if she couldn't be a veterinarian, she wanted to be a teacher like Miss Daisy. Then she gave Miss Daisy a big smile. I hate her. Chapter 7, Bonbons and Football. The next day, Miss Daisy brought in a box with ribbons on it and told us she had a surprise. What's in the box? We pleaded. It's a secret. Please. Well, okay, she said, opening the box. It's bonbons. Miss Daisy said she thought we might be able to use them for arithmetic problems so we could learn together. She put the bonbons on the table in the front of the room. There must have been 20 or 30 of them. Can somebody think up an arithmetic problem using bonbons? She asked Andrea. If you had 3 bonbons in a box, said Andrea as she put 3 bonbons onto her pencil box, and you had 3 boxes just like that, how many bonbons would you have altogether? Miss Daisy looked at Andrea's pencil box for a long time, counting in her head and on her fingers. Any dummy would know that 3 boxes with 3 bonbons in each box would equal 9 bonbons. 3 times 3 is 9. But Miss Daisy didn't seem to know that. Finally, she opened up Andrea's pencil box and popped the 3 bonbons into her mouth. Who cares how many bonbons I would have, she said, as long as I get to eat them. Miss Daisy really needs a lot of help with arithmetic. After she had eaten her bonbons, Miss Daisy passed out bonbons for all of us, and we had a bonbon party. Then she said that was enough arithmetic for the day and asked what we wanted to talk about for the rest of the math time. Football, I shouted. Miss Daisy didn't like that talk. Without raising my hand first, personally, I don't see what raising my hand has to do with talking. I don't talk with my hands. But she did let me talk, and I told her that football is just about my favoriteest thing in the whole world, and I know all about it. My dad takes me to every game of the Chargers, a professional football team. Maybe you can help me, Miss Daisy said. I always wondered how long is a football field. 100 yards, I told her. Anybody knows that. Wow, that's a big field. With a field that big, how can you and your father see what's going on? My dad always tries to get us seats near the 50-yard line, I said. They're the best tickets. Why? Miss Daisy asked. Because the 50-yard line is right in the middle of the field. Does that mean that half of the 100 yards would be 50 yards, she asked. Yup. I see, Miss Daisy said. So if you know there are 100 yards in a football field, do you know how many pennies there are in a dollar? Andrea? 100, hollered Andrea Young, just like a football field. Really? Said Miss Daisy. So if half the football field is 50 yards, how many pennies are in half a dollar? 50, Michael Robinson shouted, because 50 is half of 100, and 50 plus 50 makes 100. And half of 50 must be 25, because 2 quarters is 50 cents, added Emily. And 4 quarters makes $1, Ryan exclaimed. And 4 quarters makes a football game too, Miss Daisy shouted, jumping up and down with excitement. Wait a minute, I said. I thought you told us we were finished with arithmetic. This wasn't arithmetic, she told us. It was football. Well, okay, I said, just as long as you weren't trying to sneak arithmetic into our conversation. Would I do that? Miss Daisy asked, and then she winked at me. Sometimes it's hard to tell if Miss Daisy is serious or not. Chapter 8, A Lot of Books. On Thursday, Principal Klutz came into our class. He was wearing a hat which almost made him look like a regular person who had hair on his head. I have to go to a meeting, Principal Klutz told us, but I heard that some of you second graders had something important you wanted to discuss with me. Miss Daisy said that I could ask my question. Can we buy the school? Principal Klutz said. Is what grown-ups say instead of or when they don't know what to say. Why do you want to buy the school? Principal Klutz asked. Because we want to turn it into a video game arcade. I see, said the principal. Schools cost a lot of money. How much? I asked. If you tell us how much it will cost, we'll raise the money. I'll tell you what, Principal Klutz said. I can't sell you the school, but I can rent it to you for a night. Do you know the difference between buying and renting? Andrea Young got her hand up first, as usual. When you buy a video, you get to keep it forever. If you rent it, you have to return the video to the store the next day. That's right, the principal said. Would you be interested in renting the school for a night? How much would it cost? 1,000,000 pages. Huh? If you kids read 1,000,000 pages in a book, you can turn the school into a video game arcade for one night. 1,000,000 pages? That sounded like a lot of books. How about 1,000 pages? 1,000,000, said Principal Klutz. That's my final offer. Take it or leave it. Would it be okay if some of the other classes helped out? Miss Daisy asked. Certainly, Principal Klutz said. The more the merrier. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do. If the kids in the school read 1,000,000 pages, I will come to the big video game night dressed in a gorilla suit. You got a deal, I said, rushing forward to shake Principal Klutz's hand. In my head, I was already hatching a plan. Chapter 9. Put Those Books Away. As soon as I got home from school, I went up to my big sister Amy's room. Amy's in 5th grade, so she knows a lot of things. You've got to help me, I said. If the school reads 1,000,000 pages in books, Principal Klutz will put on a gorilla suit and let us turn the school into a video game arcade. I would do anything to see that, Amy. Amy knows how to work the computer really well. She helped me make posters that said, "Let's turn our school into a video game arcade, and let's turn Principal Klutz into a gorilla." We tacked the posters up all over Main Street. Amy sent emails and instant messages to all the kids in the 5th grade. The next morning, we tacked the posters all over school. I passed them out to the kids. Miss Rupert, the school librarian, said we could put up posters in the library. Mr. Sacco, the custodian, said we could put them up all over the lunchroom and the bathroom. Miss Hine, the music teacher, said we could put them up in the music room. By the middle of the day, everyone in school was reading like crazy. Kids were reading during lunch, kids were reading during recess, kids were plowing through those books, and then running to the school library to ask Miss Rupie if we could check more out. I read a book about frogs. I don't even care anything about frogs. Some of the teachers were starting to get mad because kids were reading books when they were supposed to be doing other things. "Please put those books away," Miss Daisy had to tell us. "It's not time for reading." Miss Daisy said she was sorry that she wouldn't be able to help us very much because she didn't know how to read, but she was nice enough to draw a big mural in the hallway with a giant thermometer on it. Every time we read a lot of pages, she would make the temperature line go up. At the top of the thermometer, there were words 1,000,000. Soon kids were bursting into the room and yelling, "Miss Bick's class has read another 500 pages. Miss Hassenfront says to add another 600 pages. It was fun watching the thermometer temperature go up. At the end of the week, our school had read almost 500,000 pages. Chapter 10. Football players are really dumb. "Boys and girls, today we have a very special famous guest," Miss Daisy said. "His name is Boomer Wiggins." "Wow," was the first thing everyone said. "Who is he?" was the second thing everybody said. But I knew who Boomer Wiggins was because Boomer Wiggins was my hero. He was the quarterback of my favorite football team, the Chargers. Whew, a real football player right in our class. Miss Daisy told us that Boomer Wiggins had a daughter in 4th grade, and that's why he was spending the day at our school. When Boomer Wiggins walked into the class, everyone gasped. He was really big and so many muscles that poked out everywhere. Everyone crowded around him, and Boomer let us feel his arm muscles. I couldn't even get my hands around them. Then Boomer picked up Emily with one hand. He was amazing. Then he gave each of us a little plastic football, and he signed his name on it. "Does anybody have any questions?" Boomer asked. "Do you like knocking guys on their butts?" I asked. Everyone laughed, even though I didn't say anything funny. Miss Daisy said it was butt, not butts, because a person only has one butt. But I said a butt was divided into 2 halves, so really it could be butts. Miss Daisy said that was enough of that. I said she shouldn't be complaining because she was the one who started it. "I don't like knocking people down," Boomer said, "but sometimes we have to because it's a part of the game." "Mr. Wiggins," asked Miss Daisy, "is it true that football players are really dumb?" We all gasped. I was afraid Boomer Wiggins might knock Miss Daisy on her butt. "Excuse me," Boomer said, like he wasn't sure if he had heard the question. "Well, somebody once told me that if you play football, you don't have to know how to read, write, or do arithmetic, or go to school." "Who told you that?" Boomer asked Miss Daisy. Everyone looked at me. I slid down so that my head was almost under the desk, and I hid behind my notebook. "Oh, a good friend of mine told me," Miss Daisy said. "Is it true?" "If I didn't go to school, I never could have become a football player," Boomer said. "I have to read and study my playbook very carefully. I have to write letters to my fans every week. I have to study very hard to get ready for the next game." "Did you have to go to college?" asked Miss Daisy. "Yes," said Boomer, "and when my football career is over, I plan to go back to school so I can become a doctor." "Wow," I said. "I want to go to college someday so I can become a doctor and knock guys on their butts. But." Everybody laughed, even though I didn't say anything funny. Then to prove how smart he was, Boomer Wiggins read us a book and passed out bookmarks that said, "Achieve your goal by reading." Miss Daisy said that even though Boomer read the book to us, we could still add 52 pages to the total. The temperature level on the thermometer in the hallway kept getting higher and higher. Chapter 11. We Rule the School. Finally, the big moment arrived. It was Andrea Young, of course, who read the 1 millionth page. We all cheered when Miss Daisy went out into the hallway and filled in the top of the thermometer all the way to the words 1 million. That Friday night, everybody in the whole school showed up. Can you believe it? I actually couldn't wait to get to school on the weekend. When we got there, a big banner was hanging over the front door that said, "We read 1 million pages" on it. Principal Klutz was waiting for us. He was wearing a gorilla suit just like he promised. Inside there were a table of snacks and treats and juice. Miss Daisy had brought in bonbons. Best of all, the gym was filled wall to wall with video games. I had never seen so many video games in my life. Families had brought in lots of TV sets, game systems, games lined them all around the gym. We could play all we wanted, and the only rule was that you had to take turns. For the kids who didn't like video games, there were tables of board games set up in the middle of the gym. I think they're called board games because you get so bored playing them. I played just about every video game in the gym. After a few hours of staring into screens, I had a splitting headache, my hand hurt, and I thought my eyes were going to fall out of my head. It was the greatest night of my life. Chapter 12. Poor Miss Daisy. Monday at school, we had social studies. Miss Daisy said she was really sorry, but she didn't know anything about social studies and that she would have to have help. "I don't even know the name of the first president of the United States," she told us. "You don't?" we said. "I haven't a clue." "It was George Washington," we shouted. "Really?" said Miss Daisy. "Never heard of him." I was beginning to suspect that Miss Daisy might have been pretending that she didn't know anything all along. One day I caught her looking at a piece of paper, and her eyes were moving back and forth like she was watching a ping-pong game. "Hey, you're reading," I said. "I'm not," she insisted. "You know I can't read." "Then how come your eyes are moving back and forth like you're watching a ping-pong game?" I was thinking about this great ping-pong game I saw once," she replied. "It was great. You should have been there." Maybe she was joking. Maybe she wasn't. You can never tell with crazy Miss Daisy. It turns out that Miss Daisy really doesn't know anything. I feel sorry for her. The kids in our school had read 1 million pages, and she couldn't read one. The kids in our class knew how to spell and do arithmetic and social studies, and she hardly could do anything at all. "Don't feel bad, Miss Daisy," I told her. "We'll teach you reading, writing, and arithmetic. We won't tell Principal Klutz how dumb you are." She gave me a big hug. It will be hard work teaching Miss Daisy everything that she doesn't know. I think that by the end of the year, if the whole class works together, we just might bring her up to the 2nd grade level, but it won't be easy. The end. That was pretty good. Hope you guys enjoyed this book. Till we meet again. Bye-bye.